The call that changed everything. The morning air was crisp, sunlight filtering through my bedroom window as I stretched, feeling the familiar soreness settle deep into my muscles. Another long week of back-to-back massage therapy sessions had taken its toll, but it was the kind of exhaustion I welcomed. There was something deeply satisfying about my work, helping people find relief, ease their pain, and regain comfort in their bodies. To me, massage therapy wasn't just about loosening tight muscles. It was about healing, about giving people a break from their burdens, if only for an hour at a time. It was fulfilling, yes, but also exhausting. I reached for my phone and checked the time. Barely 8 a.m., a whole day ahead of me. But at least I had planned to take the morning off before my first client in the afternoon. I set the phone back down and rubbed the stiffness out of my neck. Maybe I'd grab a coffee, go for a light jog, and my phone buzzed. I groaned, debating whether to ignore it, but the name flashing on the screen made my breath hitch. Laura. I sat up straighter, rubbing my eyes before answering. "Hey, Kevin." Her voice came through the speaker, warm yet carrying an unmistakable weariness. "I hope I'm not calling too early." No, you're fine," I replied, shaking off the last traces of sleep. "What's up?" She hesitated for a second. "I know this is kind of sudden, but I need your help. My back has been acting up for a few days now, and I heard you're one of the best." A small chuckle escaped me. I appreciate the vote of confidence. Laura wasn't just any client. She was my mother's friend, someone I had known since I was young. Though we had never been particularly close, a few years older than my mom, she had always been one of those effortlessly put-together women, the kind of person who exuded quiet confidence. I remember overhearing family conversations about her difficult divorce not too long ago, though I never got involved in those discussions. I hadn't expected her to call me. "You free today?" she asked. I glanced at my schedule. "Yeah, I can fit you in. When are you available?" "An hour." "That works. Come on by." As soon as I hung up, I exhaled slowly. Something about this felt different. I had given massages to all kinds of clients: athletes, office workers, even stressed-out single parents. But massaging Laura, that felt strangely personal. Still, she was in pain, and that was my job, to help. The arrival. An hour later, I had the massage room prepped, dim lighting, soft instrumental music playing in the background, essential oils diffusing in the air. I kept my workspace professional, clean, and inviting. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath before opening it. Laura stood there, looking effortlessly elegant despite the simplicity of her outfit, a dark blue dress that accentuated her figure without being too revealing. Her hair was tied back loosely, strands framing her face in a way that made her look younger than I remembered. "Hey," she greeted, offering a small smile. "Hey, come on in," I replied, stepping aside. She glanced around as she entered. "Wow, this place is nice. You've really set up a whole atmosphere here." "Helps people relax," I said. "You'd be surprised how much tension melts away just by being in a calm space." She gave a small nod and then exhaled, rolling her shoulders. "I really need this. My back's been killing me lately." "Let's get you sorted out then." I led her to the massage table. "Go ahead and sit first. Let's talk about where the pain is." She perched on the edge, crossing one leg over the other. "It's mostly my lower back, but my shoulders have been tight too. Probably from sitting too long at work and just stress." I nodded. "Makes sense. Do you have any injuries or conditions I should be aware of?" "Nope, just the weight of the world." I chuckled at that. "All right. We'll start with some light pressure, and I'll gradually work deeper into the muscles. If anything feels uncomfortable, let me know, okay?" She nodded, her expression softening. "Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate this." "No problem. Lie down on your stomach when you're ready." The first touch. As she settled onto the table, I covered her with a sheet and adjusted the lighting slightly. I had done this 1,000 times before. Muscle memory took over as I started with gentle warming techniques, my hands moving carefully across her back. But something was different. I couldn't ignore the way her skin felt under my fingertips, how her breathing changed when I pressed into a particularly tense spot. There was a certain intimacy in the silence, the rhythmic kneading of muscles, the quiet inhales and exhales, the occasional sigh of relief. She trusted me completely in this moment. "This feels amazing," she murmured after a while. I didn't realize how much I needed this. "You're carrying a lot of tension," I observed. "You might need more than just one session to fully work it out." She hummed softly. "That wouldn't be the worst thing." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. But I focused on my work, making slow, calculated movements along her spine. As the session continued, we talked. Light conversation, at first. Work, hobbies, life after her divorce. "It's strange," she admitted after a while. "You don't realize how much you rely on a person until they're gone. It's not even about love or loss. It's about routine. The empty spaces they leave behind." I paused for half a second before continuing. "That sounds tough." She let out a quiet laugh. "Yeah, but I'm figuring it out. Learning how to fill those empty spaces on my own." I didn't know what to say to that, so I focused on the rhythm of my hands instead. The session continued in comfortable silence, save for the occasional murmur of relief when I worked out a stubborn knot. The shift. By the time I finished, I could tell she felt lighter, both physically and emotionally. As I helped her sit up, she stretched her arms, rolling her shoulders with a content sigh. "I feel so much better already." "That's the goal," I said with a small smile. "But I'd recommend at least 5 sessions to really get your muscles back to where they should be." She raised an eyebrow. 5, huh? It's the best way to get lasting results." She nodded, then hesitated. Her eyes met mine for a fraction longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between us. I cleared my throat. "Same time next week." Laura tilted her head slightly, as if considering something. Then she smiled. "Yeah, I'll be back." As she walked out the door, I stood there for a moment, feeling an odd mixture of relief and something else I couldn't quite place. This was just a professional session, nothing more. But as I cleaned up the massage room, my mind kept drifting back to the way she looked at me before she left. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Boundaries begin to blur. The week between Laura's first session and the second one seemed to stretch longer than it should have. I told myself I was just being professional, just preparing for another client. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It wasn't just about her back pain anymore. The way she looked at me before she left, the way her voice softened when she said she'd be back, it replayed in my mind more times than I was willing to admit. I kept busy with my regular clients, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Laura. It was an unusual distraction, something I wasn't used to. Massage therapy required absolute focus. Every movement, every touch had to be precise and intentional. But every time I thought about our last session, I found myself wondering what our next conversation would be like. And then, the day finally arrived. She was coming back. The second session begins. I had already prepped the room. Dim lighting, soft instrumental music, the usual calming atmosphere. It was the kind of environment I created for all my clients. But this time, as I checked the table for the third time, I realized I was overthinking things. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. This was just another session. Another client. Nothing more. Then, the doorbell rang. I exhaled sharply before walking over, opening the door to find Laura standing there, this time in fitted jeans and a soft, loose sweater. Her hair was down, waves cascading over her shoulders. She looked different from last time, more relaxed, but with something else in her expression that I couldn't quite define. "Hey," she greeted, offering a small smile. "Hope I'm not too early." I shook my head. Not at all. Come in. She stepped inside, taking in the familiar space. I've been looking forward to this all week, she admitted, stretching her arms above her head before rolling her shoulders. That first session worked wonders. That's what I like to hear, I said, motioning toward the table. You ready for round 2? She smirked. Absolutely. The first touch, a shift in energy. She lay down on the massage table, exhaling as she settled in. Same as last time? I asked, standing at her side. She nodded. Yeah. My lower back still has some tension, and my shoulders are stiff again. I must be cursed. I chuckled. More like overworked. But don't worry. We'll fix that. I started with gentle pressure, kneading the muscles along her shoulders, working through the tension carefully. Her breathing slowed as she relaxed, letting herself sink into the table. For the first few minutes, everything was professional. Routine. I focused on my work, keeping my movements precise. But then, something changed. Her body responded to my touch differently this time. The way her shoulders relaxed beneath my hands, the way her breathing changed when I applied deeper pressure, it wasn't just relief I was feeling from her. It was something else, something I wasn't sure how to define. And then she spoke. This feels different, she murmured, her voice quiet but thoughtful. I hesitated, keeping my movements steady. Different how? She exhaled, pausing before she answered. I don't know. It's just. I feel lighter, but not just physically. It's like I'm letting go of something I didn't realize I was holding on to. I paused for half a second before responding. That's good. Sometimes stress manifests physically. When you let go of the tension in your muscles, you let go of other things too. She hummed softly. Yeah, maybe that's it. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else entirely. Something unspoken. A deeper conversation. As I continued working, Laura suddenly asked, Can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated for a moment, then said, Do you ever get attached to your clients? The question caught me off guard. I kept my hands moving, keeping my tone neutral. I care about all my clients, in the sense that I want them to feel better. But I always try to maintain a boundary. Yeah, she murmured. That makes sense. A beat passed before she added, I think that's why this feels different. It's not just about the massage. It's about the connection. My hand slowed slightly, just for a fraction of a second. There it was, the thing I had been trying to ignore. I exhaled through my nose, carefully choosing my next words. Massage therapy requires trust. The more comfortable someone feels, the more effective the treatment. She chuckled softly. That was a very professional answer. I smirked, shaking my head. It's true, though. She sighed. I guess I'm just not used to this kind of care. The kind that doesn't expect anything in return. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated again, then admitted, after my divorce, I kind of shut people out. Not intentionally, but I stopped trusting easily. It's weird to feel this comfortable with someone again. I listened carefully, feeling something tighten in my chest. She was opening up to me in a way that wasn't just professional. She trusted me, and that realization made something shift inside me. The unspoken understanding. For the rest of the session, we didn't speak much, but the air between us was charged with something different. Every time my hands moved across her back, I could feel it, the way she relaxed into my touch, the way she let go of more than just muscle tension. When the session finally ended, she sat up slowly, stretching her arms before looking at me with an unreadable expression. I forced a smile. How do you feel? She exhaled. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying has been lifted. I nodded. Good. That's progress. She hesitated, then looked at me carefully. Kevin. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, finally, she said, Thank you. And for some reason, those two words carried more weight than I expected. She wasn't just thanking me for the massage. She was thanking me for something deeper, something I wasn't sure either of us fully understood yet. The lingering moment. As she gathered her things, there was a pause, a hesitation before she turned to leave. She met my eyes, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something else. But then she just smiled softly. "I'll see you next week," she asked, her voice quieter than before. I nodded. "Yeah, I'll be here." She gave me one last lingering look before walking out the door. And as I stood there, alone in the silence of the room, I realized something. I wasn't just helping her heal. Something was shifting between us, something we both felt but weren't ready to name. Yet, a connection that can't be ignored. The weight that felt like forever. Days stretched like rubber bands, taut with an unspoken tension that refused to snap. I tried to focus on my regular clients, losing myself in the rhythm of my work. But no matter how many muscles I needed, no matter how many conversations I had, my mind kept drifting back to her. Laura. The way she sighed in relief when I eased the tension in her back. The way she hesitated at the door after our last session, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I told myself this was normal. It wasn't uncommon to form bonds with clients over time, especially those who shared pieces of their personal struggles. But this felt different. She felt different. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't sure if I was crossing a line or if we both had already stepped over it. When my phone buzzed one evening, I nearly ignored it, thinking it was another client requesting an appointment. But then I saw the name. Laura. My pulse kicked up a notch as I swiped to answer. "Hey, Laura." There was a pause before she spoke. "Hey, Kevin. I know our next session isn't for a few more days, but would you be able to squeeze me in tomorrow?" Her voice sounded different. Tense. Almost hesitant. I frowned slightly. "Yeah, of course. Everything okay?" A short silence. Then, "Yeah, I think I just need it sooner than later." Something in my gut told me there was more to it than that. But I didn't push. "I can do tomorrow at 7. I offered. A quiet exhale. "That's perfect. Thank you, Kevin." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my screen. This wasn't just about her back anymore. Something was happening. Something neither of us seemed to be able to stop. The unexpected late-night session. The next evening, just as the last sliver of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Laura standing there, hair slightly tousled, wearing a fitted black turtleneck and dark jeans. There was something different in her eyes, something guarded yet vulnerable all at once. "Hey," I greeted, stepping aside. "Come in." She walked past me, her scent lingering, something warm and subtly floral. I shut the door and turned to find her scanning the room like she was seeing it for the first time. "You okay?" I asked gently. She let out a breath, shaking her head with a soft laugh. "Yeah, just a long day." I didn't believe her. Something was off. But again, I didn't push. Instead, I motioned toward the table. "Let's get started. You know the drill." She nodded and moved to sit on the edge of the table, rubbing her temples. "I think I might actually be more tense than last time. I can feel it in my neck now, too." "Stress does that," I said. "Tension always finds a way to settle somewhere." She gave me a look, one that made my stomach tighten. "Yeah, I'm starting to realize that." I turned away to dim the lights, needing a moment to collect myself. The energy between us felt different tonight, charged in a way that made the air in the room heavier. When I turned back, Laura was already lying down on the table, arms resting at her sides, eyes closed. I took a steadying breath and placed my hands gently on her shoulders, beginning with slow, careful movements, more than just physical tension. As I worked through the knots in her back, I could feel her body respond more intensely than before. She sighed when I applied deeper pressure, melting under my hands in a way that sent a slow heat creeping through my chest. "This feels better than I remembered," she murmured. I swallowed hard. You were really tight last time. Your muscles are starting to release more now. She let out a quiet hum. Maybe it's not just my muscles that needed to relax. Her words made me pause for just a fraction of a second. There it was again. That undercurrent of something unspoken. Something we both felt but weren't acknowledging. I kept my hands moving, focusing on the patterns I had mastered over years of practice, but my mind was far from professional at that moment. She wasn't just another client anymore. And I knew she felt it too. The moment that changed everything. Kevin. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Yeah. She hesitated, then sighed. Never mind. I wanted to ask. I wanted to know what she had been about to say. But I didn't. Instead, I continued working on the knots in her lower back, my fingers pressing into the tension there. Her breathing changed. Shallow, slow. I felt the shift before she even spoke again. Do you ever feel like some people come into your life at just the right time? She asked suddenly. I blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? She sighed, rolling her shoulders slightly beneath my touch. Like you didn't expect them, but they showed up exactly when you needed them. A long pause stretched between us. Then, before I could stop myself, I admitted, yeah, I do. Silence. And then Laura turned her head slightly, her cheek resting against the table as she looked at me. Her eyes met mine, something raw and searching in her gaze. My hand stilled. The space between us had never felt smaller. I knew, in that moment, that we had passed the point of no return, a line we couldn't ignore. The session ended, but the tension didn't. Laura sat up slowly, rolling her shoulders before meeting my gaze again. I don't think this is just about the massage anymore, she said quietly. I swallowed. I know. She held my stare for a long moment before standing, running a hand through her hair. Kevin, She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. This is complicated, isn't it? I exhaled. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then she took a step closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, feel the warmth of her presence, close enough that if I reached out, I could touch her. But I didn't. We stood there, neither of us saying anything, caught in something that felt too big to name. Finally, she gave me a small, almost sad smile. I'll see you next time. She turned and walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back. For a split second, it looked like she might say something else. But then she just nodded once and left. And I was left standing there, heart pounding, knowing that whatever this was between us, it wasn't over. Not even close. A crossroad between professionalism and desire. The aftermath of that night. After Laura left, I sat in my massage studio for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. The air still carried the faint scent of her perfume, and the warmth of where she had been lying on the massage table still lingered. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just another client session. This was something else, something I wasn't sure I was ready to acknowledge. For years, I had maintained strict professionalism with my clients. My hands were meant to heal, to ease pain, not to create this kind of tension, not to blur lines that were supposed to remain clear. But with Laura, the lines weren't just blurred. They were obliterated. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed every moment of our session. The way she had looked at me, her voice barely a whisper when she admitted this wasn't just about the massage anymore. The way she had lingered at the door, as if waiting for me to say something, to do something. I wanted to tell myself I had done the right thing, that I had kept my distance. But deep down, I knew I was already too far gone. The next morning, an unexpected message. My phone buzzed early in the morning. I groggily reached for it, expecting a client booking. But when I saw the name on the screen, I bolted upright. Laura. I hesitated before opening the message. Laura. Hey, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Just wanted to say thanks for last night's session. It really helped. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. That was fine. That was professional. That was. Another message popped up. Laura. But I also can't stop thinking about something. My chest tightened. I hovered over the keyboard, debating whether to ask what she meant. And then, before I could overthink it, I typed, "Me." Thinking about what? The 3 dots appeared almost instantly, showing she was typing. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Then, finally, her response came. "Laura, about how I felt when I was there. About how much I trust you. About how safe I feel with you." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. She was telling me something without saying it, and I didn't know how to respond. But before I could figure it out, another message came. "Laura, can we talk?" A meeting outside the studio. I agreed to meet Laura that evening, but not at my studio. It felt wrong. Too intimate. Too tempting. Instead, we met at a quiet cafe not far from my place. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a table by the window, a cup of tea cradled between her hands. She looked different tonight. Not in the way she dressed. She was in a simple blouse and jeans, but in the way she carried herself. There was no guarded tension in her shoulders, no hesitation in her gaze when she looked up and met my eyes. "Hey," she said softly as I sat down across from her. "Hey." A small, comfortable silence settled between us before she finally spoke. "I know I put you in an awkward position last night," she admitted, stirring her tea absently. I needed to say what I was feeling." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. "But I also know this is your job, and I don't want to make things complicated for you." I exhaled. "Laura, things are already complicated." She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Yeah, I know." Another pause. Then she said, "I don't know what this is, Kevin, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time." I swallowed. "And what's that?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Safe." Something inside me cracked at that word. Safe. Not attracted. Not interested. Safe. She wasn't just coming to me for physical relief. She was coming to me because I was the first person in a long time who made her feel secure. I exhaled. "Laura, I don't want to take advantage of what you're feeling. I need you to be sure about this." Her gaze softened. "I know. And that's why I trust you." Silence stretched between us again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was warm. It was something unspoken that didn't need to be explained. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to stop fighting it. I allowed myself to just be. A decision we couldn't ignore. That night, as we walked out of the cafe, something shifted. Neither of us spoke as we reached our cars. But when she turned to me, hesitation flickering in her eyes, I already knew what she was going to ask. I had felt it in the way she looked at me all evening. I had seen it in the way her hands trembled slightly when she reached for her car keys. And when she finally whispered, "Can I see you again?" outside of our sessions, I didn't hesitate this time. "Yes," I said simply. A slow smile spread across her lips, relief washing over her features. "Okay," she whispered. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just about the massage anymore. It never had been. And whatever happened next, neither of us were turning back. A step into the unknown. The walk to her car. The unspoken words. The night air was crisp as Laura and I walked toward our cars, our footsteps slow and unhurried. It was clear neither of us wanted to leave just yet, but neither of us knew what to say either. Something had shifted between us in that cafe. Something we both felt but hadn't fully acknowledged. Laura had always carried herself with quiet confidence, even when she was tired or stressed. But tonight, as we walked side by side, she seemed almost vulnerable. I wasn't used to seeing her like this, and yet I wasn't sure if I wanted to look away. We reached her car first. She stopped by the driver's side, keys in hand, but she didn't open the door. Instead, She turned toward me, her expression unreadable. "This feels strange, doesn't it?" she murmured, half laughing under her breath. I nodded. "Yeah, it does." She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "You're being careful." I exhaled. "Shouldn't I be?" She smiled, but there was something sad about it. "Probably." Another pause. Then she said, "I don't want you to feel like I'm putting you in a difficult position." "You're not," I assured her. "I mean, not in the way you think." Her gaze flickered. "Then what way?" I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a slow breath. "Laura, I've spent my entire career keeping boundaries with my clients, and I want to do the right thing here." She nodded, but she didn't look away. And then, her voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "What is the right thing?" I swallowed. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I should have told her that the right thing was to keep this professional, that I was here to help her heal, not to make things complicated. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw someone who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Someone who had spent too much time feeling alone, even in a room full of people. And maybe the right thing wasn't as simple as keeping my distance. Maybe the right thing was this. She let out a soft breath, as if she could hear my thoughts. Then, without thinking, I reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. She froze. Her breath hitched. And in that moment, something passed between us. Something fragile and real. Something we both felt but still didn't fully understand. "I should go," she whispered, but she didn't move. "Yeah," I agreed. "You should." Neither of us moved. The space between us felt impossibly small, like a line we were on the verge of crossing. And yet, we both hesitated. Then, finally, she exhaled. "Good night, Kevin." "Good night, Laura." She opened her car door, hesitated for just a second longer, then got in. And as I watched her drive away, I knew. Whatever was happening between us, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The restless night. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. I had been so careful for years, so disciplined about separating my work from my personal life. And yet, with Laura, I was unraveling. It wasn't just about attraction. It wasn't just about the way she looked at me or the way my hands felt on her skin during our sessions. It was her. The way she spoke, the way she let her guard down in my presence, the way she trusted me when she didn't trust many people at all. I was drawn to her in a way I hadn't expected. And now I had to figure out what to do about it. I rolled onto my side, rubbing a hand over my face. I had agreed to see her outside of our sessions. That alone was dangerous territory. I had no idea where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be able to walk away from it. Not now. Not anymore. The next morning, the conversation that changed everything. By the time morning rolled around, I was running on barely 3 hours of sleep, but I still forced myself out of bed, showered, and grabbed my first cup of coffee. I was halfway through answering emails when my phone buzzed again. Laura. I stared at the screen for a second before opening the message. Laura. Hey, I hope I didn't make things weird last night. I sighed, shaking my head before responding. Me. You didn't. A pause. Then another message. Laura. Are you sure? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, finally, I typed. Me? No. But I don't think that's a bad thing. The 3 dots appeared instantly, showing she was typing. Then she stopped. Then started again. Laura, can we meet again? I exhaled. Then, before I could overthink it, I replied. Me, yeah. When? Her response came fast. Laura, tonight. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just about her back pain anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. And tonight was going to change everything. The night that changed everything. The anticipation before the meeting. The rest of the day felt like a blur. I went through the motions, answering emails, taking client calls, even squeezing in a workout to burn off the restless energy. But no matter what I did, my mind kept circling back to one thought. Tonight, I was meeting Laura. Not for a massage session, not as a client, but as something else, and that terrified me. I had spent years perfecting the art of keeping my emotions separate from my work. Touch was my profession, but it had never been personal. Until the way her breath hitched under my fingertips. Until the way she whispered my name like it meant something more than just a job title. And now I wasn't sure where this was going. But I was done pretending I didn't want to find out. The meeting place. Laura suggested we meet at a quiet rooftop lounge outside the city, somewhere secluded enough to avoid familiar eyes, but still neutral ground. I arrived first, the golden glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the open-air terrace. The atmosphere was warm, inviting, with just enough background music to make conversation easy. And then I saw her, walking toward me, dressed in a flowing navy blue dress that moved with the wind, her hair cascading in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked different tonight, softer, less guarded. And when she smiled at me, something in my chest tightened. "Hey," she said as she reached the table. "Hey." A waiter approached, but neither of us looked at the menu. We ordered mindlessly, her a glass of wine, me a whiskey, our attention entirely on each other. For a long moment, we just sat there, the city lights flickering in the distance. Then she exhaled, swirling her glass. "I feel like I should say something profound right now." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Me too, but I don't know what to say." She looked at me then, her gaze searching. "So why did you say yes?" I knew what she meant. She was asking why I agreed to meet her outside of our sessions, why I had let things progress this far when I had been so adamant about keeping things professional. I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you," I admitted. Her breath hitched slightly. "I tried to keep things professional, Laura. I really did." I set my glass down, meeting her eyes. "But every time you walked through my door, I found myself looking forward to it more than I should have." She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "I know what you mean," she whispered. The weight of her words settled between us, thick and undeniable. For the first time, we weren't just dancing around what was happening between us. We were acknowledging it. And it changed everything. A conversation that stripped away the distance. Laura leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she admitted. "Not after the divorce. I thought I was done trusting people like this." I listened carefully, sensing that this wasn't just small talk. This was her laying herself bare. "My ex-husband wasn't a bad man," she continued, voice quieter now. "But he made me feel like I was never enough. Like I was just someone to come home to, not someone to care about." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay quiet and just listen. She let out a slow breath. "After the divorce, I told myself I didn't need that kind of connection anymore, that I was fine on my own." Her eyes lifted to meet mine. "And then I walked into your studio." A shiver ran down my spine. She wasn't just talking about the massage. She was talking about us. "Laura," I started, but she cut me off with a small shake of her head. "I'm not saying I expect anything from you, Kevin," she said softly. "I just needed you to know why this is scary for me." I reached across the table before I could stop myself, covering her hand with mine. She inhaled sharply but didn't pull away. "I get it," I murmured, "and I don't want to rush anything. But I also don't want to pretend that nothing's happening between us." Her fingers curled slightly under mine. "I don't either," she whispered. The moment stretched between us, thick with something neither of us were ready to name. But we both knew. This wasn't just an impulsive attraction. This was something real. The ride home. A decision that couldn't be undone. After we left the lounge, we walked toward the parking lot together. the cool night air brushing against us. Neither of us spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because we knew. This moment, the quiet walk, the space between us, the lingering tension, was leading to something. When we reached our cars, she hesitated again, much like she had the other night. But this time, instead of saying good night, she whispered, "Come with me." I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice rough. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she admitted. And I knew then. This wasn't about physical intimacy. This was about something deeper, something that had been building for weeks, something neither of us were willing to walk away from anymore. I nodded. "Okay." And just like that, I followed her home. A night that changed everything forever. The drive to her home, a silence that spoke volumes. The drive to Laura's house was quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence, but the kind filled with anticipation, the weight of everything left unsaid hanging in the air. She led the way, her car's taillights glowing like beacons in the dimly lit streets. I followed, gripping the steering wheel tightly, my thoughts racing. I had never done this before. Never blurred lines with a client. Never let my emotions override my professionalism. But Laura wasn't just a client anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. When we finally pulled up in front of her house, she parked and stepped out of her car without hesitation. I followed, my heart hammering in my chest. She didn't say anything as she unlocked her front door and stepped inside. She just turned back to look at me, waiting, giving me one last chance to walk away. But I didn't. I followed her inside, and as the door clicked shut behind us, I knew there was no turning back now. A home that held pieces of her story. Laura's house was warm, inviting. It wasn't extravagant, but it was her. Soft lighting, books stacked neatly on the shelves, a cozy couch with a throw blanket lazily draped over one side. It felt lived in, but also lonely. She tossed her keys onto the kitchen counter and let out a slow breath. Then, finally, she turned to face me. For the first time that night, she looked nervous. "This is weird, isn't it?" she murmured, running a hand through her hair. I smiled faintly. A little. She let out a breathy laugh. "I haven't done this in a long time, Kevin." And when she finally whispered, "Stay the night," I didn't hesitate. Because I already knew. I wasn't leaving. The morning that brought clarity. I woke up to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through her curtains. Laura was still curled against me, breathing evenly, her body warm beneath the blanket. For a moment, I just lay there, taking in the peacefulness of it all. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks was gone. I wasn't questioning whether this was right or wrong. I wasn't battling with guilt or doubt. I just knew. Laura stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked up at me sleepily, then smiled. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning." She stretched, sighing contentedly. Then, after a pause, she whispered, "I don't regret this." I exhaled, brushing a stray hair from her face. Me neither. A silence stretched between us, one that didn't carry hesitation or uncertainty anymore. It carried understanding, acceptance, and something neither of us were afraid to say anymore. "This isn't just about the massage, is it?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "No, it never was." She smiled. And just like that, I knew. Whatever this was, wherever it led, I was all in. A new beginning. The morning that felt different. The sunlight streaming through Laura's bedroom window bathed everything in a soft, golden glow. I lay beside her, still trying to absorb the reality of where I was, how we got here. Her breathing was slow, even, as she stretched lazily against me, her hand resting lightly on my chest. For years, I had kept my personal and professional life separate. For years, I had convinced myself that boundaries were necessary, that emotions had no place in my work. But Laura changed all of that. She wasn't just a client. She wasn't just someone who walked into my studio looking for relief. She was someone who had been searching for something deeper, just like me. And now, lying here with her, feeling the warmth of her presence beside me, I realized something. This wasn't the end of something complicated. This was the beginning of something real. A conversation that brought everything full circle. Laura stirred, blinking up at me with a sleepy smile. "Did you sleep okay?" she murmured, her voice still thick with drowsiness. I chuckled. "Better than I have in a long time." She stretched, sighing softly before rolling onto her side to face me. For a moment, she just studied me, something unreadable in her gaze. Then finally she whispered, "What happens now?" I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "But I know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Me neither." A silence stretched between us. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was comforting, reassuring. Then, she reached for my hand, threading her fingers through mine. "I was scared," she admitted, "that this was just a passing thing. That once the night ended, it wouldn't mean anything." I squeezed her hand gently. "Does it feel like nothing?" She shook her head. "No, it feels like everything." I swallowed hard, emotions tightening in my chest. "I don't want to go back to pretending this was just a professional connection," I told her. "I don't want to act like you're just another client." She smiled, brushing her thumb over my knuckles. "So what are you saying?" she teased. I let out a soft laugh. "I guess I'm saying, I want to see where this goes, without the rules, without the boundaries." Her expression softened. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." Her fingers tightened around mine. And that was all the answer I needed. The first step forward. We spent the rest of the morning wrapped in each other's presence. No rushing, no expectations, just being together. And it felt right. When I finally got up to leave, she walked me to the door, lingering for just a moment before she reached up to press a soft kiss to my cheek. "See you soon," she murmured. I smiled. "You can count on it." And as I walked away, I realized, for the first time in years, I wasn't just helping someone else heal. I was healing too. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning.